Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today I wanted to talk about a book that I recently read, one that is about animal empaths, thievery, and parental abandonment, all unusual things. I will be talking about Other People's Pets by R.L. Maizes. I read this on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy to show you the cover, but I will put it, up here somewhere. As I like the cover, I think it's just a bird cage, but it's still a very good looking cover. For those that don't know, I've talked about R.L. Maizes before. I covered her book, We Love Anderson Cooper, on this channel. Go check out the video for that. I'll put a link in the description. I haven't released the video yet, but it's on my short list for the top 10 things that I read this year. A really solid collection of short stories that focus on magical realism, religion, spirituality, feminism, stuff like that. Social justice, really good writing on her part, and I wanted to see if that good writing, if my enjoyment extended to her other work. And she's only written one book. She's a relatively new author, so I wanted to read Other People's Pets, and so I bought it, and I found that and the short answer is I enjoyed it. For a good number of reasons. There were a few issues which I will cover later in the video. It's important to know Other People's Pets came out this year. It's a relatively new book. Find it wherever people sell books, or wherever you can check out books. Make sure to go there and find yourself a copy. This was a pretty good book, and I want to talk about why. So I'll do some summary, some analysis, and we'll move on from there. But I will make sure not to spoil the story because it's new. I'll put the time where you can find the analysis if you've already read the book and you want to see what I have to say that's a little more in depth. So let's get to it. So, Other People's Pets focuses on Lala, otherwise known as Louise. She is a vet student in vet school, currently engaged. She is an animal empath. She has the ability to feel what other animals are feeling, including their extreme pain, which is rather unfortunate. But it does give her an advantage at being a vet, since she can feel what they're feeling. She's also an ex-thief, which I will talk a little bit about later. She gets a call from her father's lawyer indicating that her father has been arrested trying to break into someone's home, and she needs to come up with the money to pay the lawyer so that her father doesn't go to prison for a long time. As a result, Lala starts going back to robbing houses. And in the process, she also helps the hurt animals and the various animals that she encounters because of her ability, which is kind of unusual in the media, because they're like, why would a thief help an animal in the process? That would be highly unusual. Lala at this time just drops out of vet school, and she starts robbing houses full time. And she doesn't tell her fiance this. Her fiance Clemson, which creates a lot of issues because you got to be honest with the person you love. She starts robbing houses in other cities. Throughout the story, really, you get a bunch of flashbacks to how she got to this point, really. Maizes talks about Lala's mother, who never really wanted to be a mom and ended up abandoning Lala after an incident on a pond where Lala was skating and she fell into the water, and there was a bunch of social stigma in the community because of that. After Lala Lala's mother left, her father Zev, which is a great name, started teaching her how to pick locks and rob houses, but he also isolated her from her friends so that she wouldn't tell anybody that they were doing this. And this continued into her teenage years, where she met some sketchy people who she taught how to rob, but one of them got caught and blamed Lala, and Zev ended up taking the fall and served probation so that Lala wouldn't get into deeper trouble there. Later, Lala has a confrontation with Clem, where he pretty much figures out that she's robbing houses because she has an item that's been stolen, that was reported on the news, and there's the whole thing about them pointing out that the thief is helping the animals, which he can kind of figure out. And so, despite the fact that they're engaged, he leaves and he sort of breaks off their relationship and starts seeing someone else throughout the story. Lala begins searching for her mother at this time, and she thinks she finds her mother and starts emailing her, but it turns out to be a scam, and they grift her for some money there. Zev realizes that his only option to avoid jail time at this point is to jump bail, and so he comes up with a pretty ingenious way to get around his ankle monitor, which I recommend you read. Maizes does a pretty good job of creating a unique scenario where someone would be able to escape their ankle monitor. Lala decides, because she doesn't have to take care of her father anymore, she decides to quit robbing. She gets a job with her mentor, Dr. Bergman, and she plans to go to vet school again in the fall. And the lawyer man who's asking her for money decides to wait until she becomes a vet to ask for the money. However, one of Lala's friends, Nat, has a boyfriend named Tank who has a shady past himself, and he's sort of insistent that she continue robbing houses because he wants some money and drugs out of it, and Lala doesn't want to do that, but he says, "Oh, you'll go back to it," and this never really becomes a factor later, except for maybe the end of the story. But I'm kind of iffy on Tank's role in this story. He could very easily just not be included. So Lala, because she doesn't have parental figures, or she feels isolated in her life, she starts robbing again, and she ends up meeting a young boy when she's robbing a house who shares her empathic abilities, and so she just recommends using those abilities to help the animal. Zev ends up fleeing to Arizona, where he starts an entirely new life. In the process, Lala finds out that her mother is also in Arizona, running an animal shelter, and so she goes to seek a reunion with her mother. What happens to Zev and what happens to Lala in Arizona, that is up for you to find out. Again, I'm going to suggest that you read this because it's worth reading, and I don't want to spoil anything there. In terms of analysis, there's a few things that I'd like to talk about here. The first is that Maizes gets at the honesty of pets, and how pets are maybe more honest than humans are. This is something that Lala believes. She's drawn to animals because they won't lie or leave you, as there are a number of people who she feels just leave her life without a good reason. Despite her lying to Clem, she feels like he should stay in his life, or stay in her life, and she's very upset about her mother, and to a certain extent Zev, for leaving her. Although she understands why Zev did it. He didn't want to be in prison, and Lala certainly didn't want him to be there either. But Lala believes that there's a certain honesty that animals have, and that's why she's drawn to them. I wouldn't say that's 100% true in this story, especially as the animals don't lie to her, but neither really do the humans. If anything, they're brutally honest. And I think what Lala is looking at with the animals is the fact that they can't tell her you're not good enough. We don't want to be around you, and then ditch her for a certain number of years. The only pain that Lala feels around animals is a physical pain brought on by her empathic abilities. So maybe that's the key difference there. Another interesting thing about this book is how Maizes touches upon the failure of authority figures, especially for someone who is in need of strong love and compassion, where none is to be found. Many people fail Lala in her life. The first person I think is Alyssa. Alyssa never really wants to be a parent. She maybe because she didn't have those strong role models in her life, and so she doesn't really know how to interact with Lala, and she views Lala as needy and she can't get a break from her, and she ends up abandoning Lala without really telling her why. And then years later, when Lala finally does get into contact with her, Alyssa apologizes, but her mom doesn't really try to make amends. She just leaves during their reunion, which is really sad. A great heartbreaking moment on R.L. Maizes' part. It's really sad, and that shows how Alyssa has failed her. Zev, while he is there for Lala, he ultimately fails her because, well, one, he's teaching her how to break into houses, which is something you typically don't do to children. You don't want to teach them that. But he's also isolating Lala from her friends, mainly so that he doesn't get in trouble. And that makes Lala feel like she doesn't have anyone to turn to for the various problems in her life. Like, she can turn to her father, but that's not enough. You need more than just a father in your life. You need social interaction. Sometimes it'd be great to have a mother or a maternal figure to provide a helping hand for a teenage girl. There's a quote that I want to read you from this story. Zev says to Lala, "I'll be your friend." He knows it isn't the same. The girls play cat's cradle, knitting strings over their fingers in elaborate patterns. They jump rope, chanting, "Cinderella, dressed in yellow, made a mistake, kissed a snake." Yet he can't take the chance Lala will slip and reveal their activities. He's prepared to be vigilant to keep the other kids away. But as soon as they hear Lala's sick, they stop coming. And I feel like that's Maizes getting at the Zev understanding that he's not being a good role model, a good father to Lala. Like, he knows that he's taking friendship away, social interaction away from Lala, but he's also saving his own skin in the process. And it's that's a bad authority figure in her life, a bad parental figure, and one way that she's being failed there. You could say that the only authority figure, parental figure in her life that does her any good is Dr. Bergman. She meets him when she's relatively young, and he helps channel her empathic abilities to help animals. And he encourages her to better herself and move on to greater things, such as vet school. He's very supportive in that way, and he provides a compassionate voice where none has been before. But you could also argue that he's only bringing animals because these are difficult cases for him, and here's an animal empath who is making things easier. So he's using Lala in a way, much like other people are using her, although it's not in a nefarious way like Zev is doing. So Bergman is definitely more friendly and more of a positive figure in her life, which is why, especially when she gets into a doubtful place later on in life, it's good that he's around because he helps provide clarity and understanding. So Lala is not completely without strong positive influences in her life. Another thing I like about this story is that Maizes touches upon generational trauma. Generational trauma is the idea that, one generation influences the other, which influences the other. If one generation doesn't address the pain, the mental health issues, the trauma that exists there, it's going to be passed down to the next generation. And if they don't figure that out, it's going to be passed down. And then you have just endless generations where people are traumatized and no problems are being solved. And this might happen with abuse or mental illness. And the generational trauma exists here because for Zev, his father beat him and his mother died when he was very young. So he didn't have a positive parental influence or role models for parenting. And Alyssa doesn't seem to have that either. And in fact, she never really wanted to be a mother, and so it never clicked with her for any number of reasons. And they all like, that's passed down to them, and they're not really a great parents towards Lala. She suffers for it because she doesn't have, those parents who dote on her or care in any sort of way, and that leaves her with Lala with lasting mental health issues, lasting feelings of abandonment that, if she were to have kids, would be passed on, probably be passed on. Luckily, the story ends on a happy note, where it's possible that she might have addressed those issues and gotten over the feelings of parental abandonment. But if she hasn't, those will definitely be passed on, and that's the lingering effect of generational trauma. Like, you may not have been abused, but the effects of abuse lead to parents maybe being more distant toward their children, maybe overcorrecting in a way, and it just results in multiple generations not receiving the care or attention that they need, and leading towards, problem for the future generations. So those were the good things I found. There were a couple of issues. The beginning of this book and some parts around the end are very slow. A lot of pacing issues there. Especially at the end, there's a lot of focus on Zev, and I'm not so interested in his story once he flees. It's nice to know that his life is in a much better place, but I'm much more interested in what's happening to Lala. And Maizes seems to put Lala in the back seat, and there's less of a focus on her, and it sort of bores me in a way, and I was hoping for more from about Lala and her struggles and her journey. I don't see how this would be a problem for many other people. Some people might be very interested in what happens to Zev, and so that this wouldn't be a big problem for them. And then another issue is Tank, the character of Tank, who seems like he's going to be a much bigger factor in the story than he is, because he threatens to blackmail Lala, and he makes it seem like he's going to pressure her into robbing again when she doesn't want to, and that never really happens. He just goes away and gets in trouble for drug abuse. He does rat on her to the police, but they never find anything. And I think maybe in a previous draft of this story, Tank had a bigger influence, but for some reason or another, Maizes edited his role down or something like that. That's what it seems to me. It's not a big deal that he has less of a role, but it does seem like she's moving in that direction, and it's just a plot point that's dropped for some reason. It would be more interesting to get more of a view of what that story would be like if he was more of a factor. But alas, that's probably another story entirely, something that we will have to wait to experience in another dimension, I guess, in another reality. Yeah, and so those are my thoughts on Other People's Pets, a very good book by R.L. Maizes, pretty solid in exploring issues of generational trauma and the feeling of isolation and sadness and grief in multiple ways. Worth checking out, in my opinion. I bought a copy, and I'm really happy about that. I definitely recommend it to everyone out there. It's going to be a strong recommendation because R.L. Maizes, her prose style is very good. It's a bit jarring at times how she jumps from the past to the present, but that's not a big issue for the book. If you can find it, I definitely recommend you check it out and read it. It's a pretty solid book. If you read this book before, you simply have something to say about my review, don't forget to comment below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion about this good book. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can get other people's pets out to the masses and make sure more people read it, because that'd be a great time. And also, I'm kind of hoping that she writes more, because this is a really good book, and I want to see more from what R.L. Maizes has to offer, especially because she's a fairly new author there, and I want to see like if she keeps getting better and makes different zany stories.